A poor widow walks into a glittering party. Then her in-laws laugh, whisper, and tear her down in front of everyone. But when the room turns cruel, a billionaire steps in, lays his jacket on her shoulders, and changes the night with one breathtaking act of kindness. The crowd gasps, and the story should end there, except it doesn't. Because the very family that mocked her, they're hiding something. A scandal is brewing, the billionaire is under fire, and the widow discovers files that could flip the truth, and the city, upside down. Now the rumors explode online, donations collapse, and a child's hope hangs in the balance. She has one choice: stay quiet and be safe, or stand up and risk everything. If one brave act can spark a miracle, can one brave heart expose the truth before they destroy everything she loves? Emily's hands trembled as she poured milk into Sammy's favorite dinosaur cereal bowl, the liquid splashing slightly over the edge. Early morning sunlight filtered through their small apartment's kitchen window, casting warm golden squares on their worn linoleum floor, highlighting the scuffs and scratches that told the story of their daily lives. She watched her son, still in his rocket ship pajamas with the slightly frayed cuffs, carefully arranging his fundraising materials on the kitchen table, his tongue poking out in concentration. "Mom, do you think we'll sell lots of cookies today?" Sammy asked, his bright eyes full of hope, small fingers straightening the order form for the third time. Emily smiled, pushing aside her own worries about the rent bill that had arrived yesterday. "With your winning smile? They won't be able to resist, sweetie. You could charm the coins out of anyone's pocket." She ruffled his hair, just like Michael used to do every morning before heading to work. The familiar pang in her chest came, sharp and hollow, as it always did when she thought of her late husband. 1 year had passed since the accident that took him instantly on a rainy Tuesday evening, but some mornings the loss felt as fresh as yesterday, leaving an empty space beside her that nothing could fill. "I made sure to put the chocolate chip ones on top," Sammy declared proudly, showing off his sales strategy, pointing to the glossy picture on his fundraiser pamphlet. "Those are everyone's favorite. Mrs. Wilson from apartment 3B told me so last time." The morning routine was their anchor now. Breakfast, getting dressed, checking backpacks, double-checking lunch money. Emily had learned to find comfort in these simple rhythms, clinging to them like lifelines, even as she juggled her part-time receptionist job at the dental office and volunteer work at Hope Haven Children's Home, where she spent 3 afternoons a week. The mail slot clinked with a metallic sound, and envelopes scattered across their welcome mat, the faded one that still read "The Carters" in cheerful letters. Emily gathered them up. Bills mostly, their corners, sharp with demands, but one cream-colored envelope stood out among the white and grey. Heavy paper, gold embossing, and the unmistakable Carter family crest with its oak tree and shield. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it, the paper making a rich sound as she broke the seal. The Carters, Michael's family, had always been intimidating with their old money and grand estate on the hill overlooking the town. They wore wealth like a second skin, while Emily had always felt like an outsider at family gatherings. The invitation inside was equally elegant, the lettering raised and formal. "The Carter family cordially invites you to the annual Spring Charity Gala in honor of Michael Carter's memory." Emily sank into a kitchen chair, the invitation heavy in her hands, weighing far more than paper should. The last time she'd seen the Carters was at Michael's funeral, where their grief had seemed more concerned with appearances than genuine emotion. His mother had dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, while his father had discussed estate matters before the reception had even begun. "What's that, Mummy?" Sammy peered over her arm at the fancy script, leaving a small smudge of cereal milk on the corner. "It's an invitation, honey, from your dad's family." Emily tried to keep her voice steady, swallowing the lump in her throat. "They're having a special party to remember Daddy, with fancy clothes and music. Sammy's face scrunched in thought, his eyebrows drawing together just like Michael's used to. "Are we going? Will there be other kids there?" Emily stared at the invitation, her mind racing through a maze of considerations. The gala would be full of wealthy donors, exactly the kind of people who might support Hope Haven if approached correctly. The children's home desperately needed repairs to its leaking roof and funding for new programs to help the older kids prepare for life after foster care. But the thought of facing the Carters, their scrutiny, their subtle disapproval of the middle-class girl their son had married against their wishes, their whispers behind manicured hands. "Yes," she said finally, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Yes, we are. We'll show them how wonderfully your dad lives on in you." Later that evening, after helping Sammy sell cookies door to door at the school fundraiser where he'd charmed 12 sales with his gap-toothed smile, Emily stood in front of her closet, the door slightly off its track. Pushed to the very back, behind practical work clothes and everyday wear, was the blue dress she'd worn to her last anniversary dinner with Michael. The silk was still beautiful, the color of a summer sky at dusk, if a little dated compared to current styles. She pulled it out carefully, holding it up to the light from her bedside lamp. A small tear had formed near the hem where it had caught on something, but nothing she couldn't fix with careful stitches. As she smoothed the fabric between her fingers, memories flooded back like a tide. Michael's proud smile when he saw her in it, the way he'd whispered breathtaking before kissing her hand, the way he'd twirled her on the restaurant's small dance floor while other diners watched and smiled. "Is that your princess dress, Mommy?" Sammy asked from her doorway, now in his own pajamas covered with dinosaurs, clutching his stuffed triceratops under one arm. Emily laughed softly, the sound coming easier than she expected. "Something like that. Your daddy bought it for me for a special night out. What do you think? Should I wear it to the party at Grandma and Grandpa Carter's house?" Sammy nodded enthusiastically, crossing the room to touch the silky fabric with wonder. "Daddy always said you looked pretty in blue. He told me it matches your eyes when you laugh." Tears pricked at Emily's eyes, hot and sudden, but she blinked them back, determined not to let sadness overtake this moment of connection. "He did, didn't he? That sounds just like something he would say." After tucking Sammy into bed with his favorite story about the brave knight who saved the kingdom, kissing his forehead and checking under the bed for monsters as was their nightly ritual, Emily returned to the dress. She sat at her small sewing table by the window, carefully mending the tear by the light of her desk lamp, the world outside growing quiet. The steady motion of the needle was soothing, giving her hands something to do while her mind wandered through memories and possibilities. She thought about Hope Haven, about the children there who needed so much, especially little Zoe with her burned hands, and Marcus who still wouldn't speak after what he'd witnessed. About Michael, whose laughter had filled every corner of their small apartment, who had always supported her volunteer work, who had taught her that doing good mattered more than looking good or fitting in. About the Carters, who had everything money could buy but seemed to understand so little about what truly mattered in life. Standing up, she held the mended dress against herself in the mirror with its slight crack in one corner. The woman who looked back seemed both familiar and strange. Thinner than before, with new lines around her eyes, but stronger than she'd expected, more determined than she'd felt in months. There was purpose in her gaze now, replacing some of the hollowness. "Michael," she whispered to her reflection, pressing the dress to her heart. "I'll make you proud. I'll speak for those kids like you always encouraged me to do." The dress billowed slightly in the evening breeze from her open window, the material dancing like water, like a gentle reminder that while some things had ended, others were just beginning. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, Sammy's math homework, the broken faucet, the bills that kept coming. But for now, Emily had a purpose, a plan, and a perfectly mended blue dress that carried memories in every thread. The Sunday morning sun streamed through Emily's kitchen window, catching dust motes in its golden rays. She watched Sammy devour his cereal, milk dribbling down his chin. His dark curls, so much like Michael's, needed a trim. "Ready for our shopping adventure?" Emily asked, wiping his face with a napkin. They had exactly $47 set aside for shoes to match her blue dress. "Can we get ice cream too?" Sammy's eyes sparkled with hope. Emily checked her wallet. "We'll see, sweetie. Let's focus on the shoes first." The bus ride downtown was crowded but peaceful. Sammy pressed his nose against the window, counting red cars and making up stories about the people they passed. Emily held him close, grateful for these simple moments. As they walked down Main Street, massive promotional posters covered the buildings. Daniel West's face looked down at them from every angle, distinguished, serious, with kind eyes that seemed to follow you. The Billionaire's latest charitable initiative was splashed across each poster, building better communities together. "Mom, look!" Sammy pointed at one of the largest posters. "That man is everywhere. Is he like a superhero?" Emily adjusted Sammy's jacket against the spring breeze. "He's a businessman who helps people, honey. He gives money to lots of different charities." "Does he help people like us?" Sammy's innocent question caught her off guard. Emily's throat tightened. She thought about their tiny apartment, the careful budgeting, the nights she lay awake wondering if she was doing enough for her son. "I'm not sure, sweetie. Sometimes helping happens in ways we can't see." The discount shoe store was cramped, but clean. Emily tried on several pairs, while Sammy entertained himself by organizing the display shoes by color. Finally, she found a pair of silver flats that wouldn't fall apart after one wearing, marked down to $39.99. "Ice cream?" Sammy asked hopefully as they left the store. Emily counted their remaining money. "You know what? Yes, we can split a small cone." They sat on a park bench, taking turns with their vanilla chocolate swirl. The spring air was sweet with flowering trees, and for a moment everything felt perfectly okay. That peaceful feeling evaporated the moment they got home. The phone was ringing as they walked through the door. "Emily, it's Vanessa." Her sister-in-law's voice held its usual precise chill. "Hello, Vanessa. How are you? Listen, about the gala." Vanessa paused meaningfully. "I just want to make sure you understand this is a formal event. The press will be there, covering our family's charitable work. We can't have anything inappropriate." Emily's fingers tightened on the receiver. "I understand." "Do you? Because last time—" Vanessa's sigh crackled through the line. "Just remember, you're still connected to the Carter name. Try not to embarrass the family." The word stung like a slap. Emily thought of Michael, how he'd always stood between her and his family's subtle cruelty. "I'll keep that in mind," she managed. "Good. Oh, and Emily, do try to do something with your hair." After hanging up, Emily stood motionless in her small living room. Sammy was already absorbed in his coloring books, humming quietly to himself. She watched him for a moment, drawing strength from his peaceful presence. Later that evening, after Sammy was asleep, Emily stood before her bedroom mirror. The blue dress hung ready on the closet door. Her new shoes waited beside it, still in their box. She studied her reflection, the tired shadows under her eyes, the worry lines that hadn't been there when Michael was alive. Slowly, deliberately, she practiced her expressions. A polite smile, a gracious nod. The look of calm interest she'd need when facing the Carter family's friends. "Grace," she whispered to herself. "No matter what happens, show grace." She thought of Michael's last birthday party at the Carter mansion. How Vanessa had loudly wondered if Emily knew which fork to use for the salad. How Michael had squeezed her hand under the table and used the wrong fork himself, making her laugh. Emily smoothed her hair back, tried another smile. This one felt more natural. She wasn't going to the gala for the Carters. She was going for Hope Haven, for the children who needed advocates. She was going for Michael, who had always believed in doing the right thing, even when it was hard. In the mirror, her reflection squared its shoulders. The woman looking back at her wasn't just a widow, just a struggling single mother. She was someone who could walk into that gala with her head held high, someone who could face whatever came with dignity. One more smile. This one wasn't for practice. It was for courage. The taxi pulled up to the Grand Plaza Hotel just as the evening sky turned a deep purple, streaked with ribbons of fading orange. Emily helped Sammy straighten his little clip-on tie, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed down the lapels of his tiny suit jacket. She'd spent nearly 30 minutes coaxing his cowlick to behave, and now it sprang back up defiantly. The doorman, in his crisp uniform with shining brass buttons, gave them a polite nod as they entered, his white-gloved hand sweeping toward the gleaming lobby. "Mom, it's like a castle!" Sammy whispered, his eyes wide at the marble floors and towering columns. He pointed at the massive flower arrangement dominating the center of the lobby, white lilies and blue hydrangeas cascading from a crystal vase. "Can we live here someday?" Emily smiled and squeezed his small hand. "Maybe in our dreams, sweetie." Following the soft music that floated through the air like a gentle invitation, they made their way down the corridor toward the ballroom. Emily's new shoes clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing with her rising nervousness. She'd found them on clearance, spending more than she should have, but tonight demanded something special. As they reached the entrance, she caught her breath, momentarily overwhelmed by the scene before them. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over everything, their light dancing off the champagne glasses carried by waiters in pristine white gloves. The room sparkled with sequined gowns and diamond jewelry that caught and reflected the light with every movement. Ladies in designer dresses gathered in elegant clusters, their laughter tinkling like wind chimes. Men in tailored tuxedos discussed business in low voices, occasionally breaking into hearty chuckles as they clinked their glasses together. Emily touched her blue dress self-consciously, running her fingers over the simple fabric. She'd spent an hour steaming out the wrinkles in her tiny bathroom, balancing the iron precariously on the sink edge, but now it felt impossibly plain among the sea of silk and beading. The hem was perfectly straight, though. She'd measured it 3 times before stitching it. Sammy squeezed her hand, grounding her with his innocent touch. "Emily." Vanessa's voice cut through the gentle murmur of conversation like a knife through butter. Her sister-in-law approached with deliberate steps, wearing a stunning red gown that hugged her figure and probably cost more than Emily's monthly rent. Diamond earrings caught the light as she tilted her head critically. "You actually came. I wasn't sure you'd brave it." "Hello, Vanessa." Emily managed a steady smile, summoning the dignity she'd practiced in her bathroom mirror. "Thank you for inviting us. The ballroom looks beautiful." Vanessa's eyes swept over Emily's outfit, lingering on the modest shoes with their slightly scuffed toes that Emily had tried to hide with shoe polish. Her perfectly painted lips curved in a slight smirk, the judgment unmistakable. "Well, you certainly tried. That's what matters, isn't it? Hello, Samuel." Sammy pressed closer to Emily's side, his small body tensing as he half hid behind her skirt. "Hi, Aunt Vanessa," he mumbled, his voice barely audible over the orchestra's gentle melody. Richard Carter appeared beside his wife, drink in hand, ice cubes clinking against crystal as he swirled the amber liquid. His tuxedo looked custom-made, not a single thread out of place. "If it isn't our favorite charity case," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, his voice carrying a fake joviality that made Emily wince. "Tell me, Emily, are you still working that little job at the coffee shop? Or have you moved on to bigger dreams?" Heat crept up Emily's neck, spreading across her cheeks like wildfire. She fought the urge to fidget with her dress's simple neckline. "I work at the library now, actually. Part-time in the children's section. And I volunteer at Hope Haven Children's Home 3 days a week with the younger kids." Ah, yes, volunteering. Richard made air quotes with his fingers, his signet ring catching the light. Always good to have a hobby while living off the family's generosity. Michael would be so proud of how you've managed. Several guests turned to stare, their curious eyes raking over Emily like searchlights. She heard whispers start up behind carefully held cocktail napkins, saw the slight nods and raised eyebrows. Her cheeks burned as she remembered that the modest stipend she received from the Carter Family Trust, barely enough to cover their small apartment and basic needs, was public knowledge, discussed at board meetings and charity functions like this one. "Mommy." Sammy tugged at her dress, his small fingers creating wrinkles in the fabric she'd so carefully pressed. His eyes, so like Michael's, looked up at her with concern beyond his years. "Can we get some juice? I'm really thirsty." "Of course, sweetie." Emily gratefully led him away from Richard and Vanessa toward the refreshment table adorned with ice sculptures and tiered platters of hors d'oeuvres. Her hands shook as she poured Sammy a glass of punch, the red liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Are you okay, Mum?" Sammy asked quietly, accepting the glass with both hands as she'd taught him. Emily blinked back tears, determined not to let them fall and ruin her carefully applied mascara, the only makeup she'd managed to put on correctly in her rushed preparation. "Yes, honey. Just a little tired. These fancy shoes aren't as comfortable as they looked in the store." She considered leaving, gathering Sammy and slipping out through the side entrance she'd noticed earlier. It would be easier than enduring more of the Carter family's subtle cruelty. Easier than feeling like an outsider in her borrowed finery. Easier than pretending she belonged among people who clearly thought she didn't. But then she saw it. A large poster board near the stage, decorated with photographs of children's smiling faces and listing the evening's beneficiaries in elegant gold lettering. Hope Haven Children's Home was written in elegant script, along with a goal amount that made her heart skip. That much money could fix the leaking roof that required buckets during heavy rains, update the outdated playground equipment with its splintering wooden structures, maybe even start the after-school program they'd been dreaming about for the children who had nowhere else to go when school ended for the day. Emily straightened her shoulders, feeling the fabric of her dress stretch slightly across her back. She dabbed at the corner of her eye with her napkin, careful not to smudge her makeup. She wasn't here for the Carters. She wasn't here for herself. She was here for Tommy with his gap-toothed smile, for Lily who read to the younger children, for Marcus who needed special tutoring, children who needed someone to speak up for them when the world had forgotten they existed. The lights dimmed slightly, and conversations quieted to expectant murmurs. A man in an impeccable tuxedo approached the microphone, tapping it twice to ensure it worked. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice resonated through the room, "if I could have your attention, please." The crowd quieted completely. Champagne glasses paused midway to lips as everyone turned toward the stage. It is my great pleasure to welcome tonight's keynote speaker, a man whose generosity has transformed countless lives in our community, whose vision has revitalized neighborhoods, and whose foundation sets the gold standard for philanthropic work. Please welcome Mr. Daniel West. The crowd burst into enthusiastic applause, the sound washing over Emily like a wave. She found herself holding her breath as she waited for her first glimpse of the billionaire philanthropist whose face she'd seen on so many posters and news articles. Sammy stood on his tiptoes, trying to see over the crowd of adults, his punch forgotten in his hand. "Can you see, Mum?" he whispered excitedly. "Is he a superhero?" The poster board caught her eye again. Hope Haven's name seemed to shine under the chandelier light, reminding her why she was here, what was truly at stake. The children's faces in those photos seemed to look directly at her, counting on her presence here tonight. Whatever happened next, she would face it with grace. For Michael's memory that deserved honoring, for Sammy's future that needed securing, and for all the children counting on Hope Haven's survival when they had nowhere else to turn. A hush fell over the ballroom as Daniel West stepped onto the stage. His presence commanded attention without demanding it. He moved with quiet confidence, his dark suit perfectly tailored, but not flashy. Unlike the other wealthy men in the room who seemed eager to display their status, Daniel carried himself with understated elegance. The overhead lights caught the slight silver at his temples, highlighting a face that showed character rather than just good genetics. He adjusted the microphone slightly, his warm brown eyes scanning the crowd with thoughtful attention. "Good evening," he began, his voice rich and steady, like a stream flowing over smooth stones. "We're gathered here tonight surrounded by luxury, crystal chandeliers, fine wine, designer clothes." He paused, letting his words settle across the crowd of attentive faces. "But true generosity isn't measured by the size of our bank accounts or the labels we wear. It's measured by something far more valuable." Emily found herself drawn in by his sincerity. There was something different about him, a genuineness that stood out in this room full of practiced smiles and polished appearances. His words didn't sound rehearsed like the other speeches she'd heard tonight. Instead, they carried the weight of personal conviction. "Real generosity," Daniel continued, his hands resting lightly on the podium's edge, "comes from understanding another person's struggle. It comes from seeing someone's pain and saying, 'I see you. I hear you. How can I help?'" His words resonated through the quiet room, seeming to touch something deeper than mere charity. That's the kind of generosity that changes lives, not just the lives of those receiving help, but also our own. When we truly connect with others, we discover what matters most. The audience applauded enthusiastically as Daniel concluded his speech with a humble nod. The sound swelled around the elegant space, bouncing off marble floors and crystal fixtures. Waiters began circulating with trays of wine, weaving expertly through the crowd of designer gowns and custom tuxedos. Emily stayed close to the wall, trying to blend in while keeping an eye on Sammy, who was happily munching on a chocolate chip cookie nearby, his leg swinging from a gilded chair. She didn't see Vanessa until it was too late. As Emily stepped backward to let a waiter pass with a precariously balanced tray, she collided with her sister-in-law. The wine in Vanessa's glass sloshed forward, missing the expensive red gown but splashing across Emily's blue dress, leaving dark stains spreading across the front like an ugly bloom. "Oh!" Emily gasped, grabbing a cloth napkin from a nearby table, her fingers trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry." Soft laughter rippled through the nearby crowd like a cruel wave. Vanessa's perfectly painted lips curved into a smile that never reached her cold eyes as she leaned close to Emily's ear. "So predictable," she whispered, her breath warm against Emily's skin. "You really don't belong here, do you? Some stains never come out." Emily's face burned hot with humiliation as she dabbed uselessly at her dress. The worn fabric had soaked up the wine immediately, leaving obvious purple-red splotches that would never come out. The dress she'd carefully altered, pressing it 3 times to look presentable, was ruined. Tears pricked at her eyes as more people turned to stare, their whispers barely concealed behind manicured hands. "Mommy." Sammy's worried voice carried across the sudden quiet, his small face pinched with concern as he slid off his chair. Then a tall figure stepped into her field of vision, blocking the curious onlookers. Emily looked up to find Daniel West standing before her, his expression kind but unreadable. Without a word or moment of hesitation, he shrugged off his perfectly tailored tuxedo jacket. The crowd watched in stunned silence as he gently draped it over her shoulders, the expensive fabric warm and carrying a subtle scent of cedar and something uniquely comforting. "Real worth doesn't shimmer under chandeliers," he said evenly, his voice carrying in the quiet room without being raised. "It shines through courage, and genuine dignity can't be stained." Emily's breath caught in her throat as she met his steady gaze. In that moment, the whispers and stares faded away like background noise. She saw understanding in his eyes, not pity, but genuine respect. Something passed between them, a quiet recognition that went deeper than the artificial glitter of the evening. Camera flashes began popping around them as photographers captured the moment, the lights creating brief starbursts in Emily's peripheral vision. Daniel's lips curved into a warm smile that reached his eyes, transforming his whole face from handsome to truly remarkable. Then he turned and walked back toward the stage, leaving Emily wrapped in both his jacket and the profound silence that had fallen over the ballroom. The weight of his jacket felt like armor around her shoulders, protecting her from the stunned stares of the crowd. The fine wool was softer than anything she'd worn in years, carrying the lingering warmth of his body. Sammy appeared at her side, slipping his small hand into hers and smiling up at her with complete trust in his eyes. In that moment, Emily stood a little straighter, finding strength in her son's touch and the unexpected kindness of a stranger who had seen past her stained dress to recognize something deeper. Her humanity in a room where it was too often measured by bank accounts and social connections. Daniel returned to the microphone, his confident posture unchanged despite having given away his jacket. He gestured to one of the event coordinators, who quickly brought him a folder. "Speaking of courage." Daniel's voice carried clearly through the sound system. "I've been inspired tonight to make an additional announcement." He opened the folder, removing a single sheet of paper. "The Carter Children's Home does remarkable work in our community, providing shelter and hope to kids who need it most." Emily's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the home. She pulled Daniel's jacket closer around her shoulders, its warmth somehow steadying her nerves. After learning more about their programs, Daniel continued, "I'm making a personal donation of $500,000 to support their mission." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. That amount would cover the home's operating costs for 2 full years. She glanced across the room to where Vanessa and Richard stood, their earlier smugness replaced by tight-lipped surprise. "Sometimes," Daniel added, his gaze sweeping the crowd, "the most valuable things in life aren't found in boardrooms or bank vaults. They're found in the quiet dedication of people who show up every day to help others." Applause erupted. Genuine this time, not the polite golf claps from earlier. Several people turned to smile at Emily, their expressions warm with newfound respect. She felt Sammy squeeze her hand, grinning up at her with pride. As the crowd began to disperse into smaller groups, Emily made her way toward Daniel, who was speaking with some board members. She waited patiently until he finished, then stepped forward. "Mr. West," she began, her voice soft but steady, "I don't know how to thank you. That donation will change so many children's lives." Daniel turned to face her, his expression genuine and unguarded. "You reminded me what this event should really be about," he said simply. Sometimes we get so caught up in the spectacle that we forget the purpose. Before Emily could respond, other guests began approaching her. Mrs. Henderson, who had barely acknowledged her earlier, now asked detailed questions about the children's home. Dr. Patterson's wife insisted on getting Emily's contact information to discuss volunteer opportunities. "You must tell me more about your work there," said an elegant older woman who introduced herself as a retired teacher. "My husband and I have been looking for a meaningful way to give back to the community." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and connections. Even those who had laughed at her wine-stained dress earlier now treated her with genuine interest and respect. Through it all, Sammy stayed close, charming everyone with his innocent observations and bright smile. As the crowd thinned and the hour grew late, Emily noticed Sammy trying to hide his yawns. "Time to head home, sweetheart," she said, gathering their things. She started to remove Daniel's jacket, but a waiter appeared with a message that it was hers to keep for now. Mr. West's driver would collect it tomorrow. Speaking of which, the same waiter added, Mr. West's car was available to take them home if they wished. Emily's first instinct was to decline, but one look at Sammy's drooping eyes changed her mind. The thought of waiting for a cab or taking 2 buses at this hour suddenly seemed exhausting. A sleek black car waited outside, its driver holding the door open with a warm smile. The leather seats were soft and comfortable, and the quiet inside the car felt like a peaceful cocoon after the noise of the gala. Sammy leaned against her side as they drove through the city's quiet streets. "Mommy," he murmured, his voice heavy with sleep. He was like an angel. Emily smiled, running her fingers through her son's hair. "Who was, sweetheart?" "Mr. West," Sammy said, his eyes already closed. "Like the angels you said watch over us. He made the mean people stop being mean." The car pulled up to their apartment building, and the driver insisted on walking them to their door. Inside their modest home, Emily carried a now sleeping Sammy to his room. She carefully changed him into his pajamas, trying not to wake him. As she tucked the blanket around him, Sammy stirred slightly. "Love you, Mummy," he whispered, already drifting back to sleep. Emily kissed his forehead, her heart full of gratitude and hope. "Love you too, Angel," she whispered back. She stood in his doorway for a moment, watching him sleep, Daniel's jacket still draped around her shoulders like a reminder that sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Emily woke to her phone buzzing like an angry bee. Sunlight streamed through her small kitchen window as she made Sammy's breakfast, trying to ignore the constant notifications. Finally, while pouring cereal, she glanced at her screen and nearly dropped the milk carton. Billionaire's noble gesture. Daniel West defends widow at annual gala. West's $500,000 donation follows dramatic evening. Carter family gala takes unexpected turn. Pictures of Daniel placing his jacket around her shoulders filled social media. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments. Such a gentleman. Finally, a billionaire with a heart. Who is she? Mommy, my cereal's getting soggy, Sammy called from the table, pulling her back to reality. She had just finished packing Sammy's lunch when sharp knocks rattled their apartment door. Through the peephole, she saw Richard Carter's stern face, his expensive suit out of place in her modest hallway. Emily opened the door cautiously. "Richard, what brings you here?" He pushed past her into the apartment, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum. "Don't play innocent, Emily. You know exactly what you're doing." "I'm getting ready to take my son to school," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "That's all I'm doing." Richard's face reddened. "Using pity to manipulate Daniel West, making our family look cruel in comparison? Very clever. I didn't manipulate anyone," Emily said, moving to stand between Richard and the kitchen where Sammy ate. Mr. West made his own choices. You'll regret meddling in family business. Richard snapped, pulling out his phone. Have you seen this morning's financial news? He thrust the screen at her. Headlines about potential fraud at West Enterprises scrolled past, alongside mentions of an investigation by Carter Financial Services, Richard's firm. Our company's audit exposed serious irregularities in West's books, Richard said, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. And now you're cozying up to him? People might think you're helping him cover things up. Emily's mind raced. Was this why Daniel had seemed so tense beneath his calm exterior last night? I barely know Mr. West, she protested. I have nothing to do with any of this. Keep it that way, Richard warned. Remember who's been supporting Sammy's trust fund since Michael died. He strode to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. Don't bite the hand that feeds you, Emily. After dropping Sammy at school, Emily's hands shook as she made coffee in the empty apartment. The morning news played on her small TV, providing background noise until Daniel West's face appeared on screen. He stood at a podium, cameras flashing, his expression composed despite the accusations being hurled at him. West Enterprises has always operated with complete transparency, he stated calmly. We welcome any investigation and will cooperate fully. The truth will speak for itself. Emily found herself moving closer to the screen, studying his face. There was something in his eyes, not fear or anger, but a quiet certainty. She remembered how he'd treated her at the gala, his simple kindness without any expectation of praise or reward. The reporter mentioned an upcoming community outreach event that weekend. Daniel's organization was renovating a youth center. Volunteers were welcome. Emily grabbed her phone and found the sign-up page before she could talk herself out of it. Richard's threats echoed in her mind as she typed in her information, but she remembered Daniel's words at the gala about real worth shining through courage. She thought of Michael, who had always taught her to trust her instincts about people. I need to see for myself, she whispered, pressing the submit button. I need to know who Daniel West really is. Her phone buzzed again with another news alert about the scandal, but this time she didn't flinch. Sometimes finding the truth meant taking risks, and something told her this was a risk worth taking. The downtown office building wasn't what Emily expected. No gleaming glass tower or marble lobby, just a warm, welcoming space, with soft yellow walls and comfortable furniture. Children's artwork decorated the hallways, and the front desk displayed a bowl of fresh apples. Welcome to West Foundation. A cheerful receptionist named Sarah greeted her. Can I help you? Emily smoothed her simple blouse. I'm Emily Carter. I volunteered for the Youth Center project, and I wanted to learn more about the Foundation's programs. Oh yes, we've been expecting you. Sarah's smile brightened. Let me show you around. As they walked through the open office space, Emily noticed something striking. Many of the employees wore military service pins, while others had photos of their children prominently displayed on their desks. A woman in a wheelchair expertly managed multiple phone lines, while a man with prosthetic legs led what appeared to be a staff meeting. Most of our team members are veterans or single parents, Sarah explained, noticing Emily's interest. Mr. West believes in giving opportunities to people who understand struggle firsthand. They passed a break room, where a young mother was heating up her lunch while bouncing a baby on her hip. Another employee immediately stepped in to hold the infant, allowing the mother to use both hands. The scene touched Emily's heart. This wasn't just an office, it was a community. Emily? A familiar voice called from behind them. She turned to see Daniel West approaching, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. Despite the recent media pressure, his face remained calm and kind. Thank you for coming, he said warmly. I hoped you might visit after signing up for the Youth Center project. Up close, Emily noticed subtle shadows under his eyes, evidence of sleepless nights dealing with the scandal. Yet his genuine smile reached those tired eyes. "Your foundation is amazing," Emily said honestly. "I had no idea you employed so many veterans and single parents." Daniel nodded. "They're the backbone of everything we do here. Would you like to see our reading room? We're launching a new children's program next month." He led her down a hallway to a cozy space filled with colorful beanbags and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A mural of a magical forest covered one wall, with tiny lights twinkling like fireflies. "We're looking for volunteer readers," Daniel explained. "Kids from local shelters come here after school. Sometimes all they need is someone to sit with them, to show them stories matter, that they matter." Emily ran her hand along a shelf of well-loved picture books. "Sammy would love this place." "He's welcome anytime," Daniel said. "Would you consider joining our reading program? We meet Tuesday and Thursday afternoons." "I'd like that," Emily replied softly. "Great. Have you had lunch? Our cafe downstairs makes excellent sandwiches." Minutes later, they sat at a quiet corner table. Emily noticed Daniel chose a spot away from the windows, probably to avoid photographers. The media frenzy hadn't died down. "How are you handling everything?" she asked carefully. "The accusations, I mean." Daniel set down his coffee cup. "It's not easy, but I've faced worse storms." He paused, seeming to decide something. "Did you know I had a sister?" Emily shook her head. "Sarah. She was brilliant, compassionate, wanted to change the world." His voice grew softer. "She died 12 years ago. The shelter she volunteered at lost its funding, had to close suddenly. She was helping residents find new places to stay, working late alone. There was a fire." Emily's heart ached at the pain in his eyes. "I'm so sorry. That's why I started the foundation. Every facility we support has top-notch safety systems now. Every shelter resident gets transition assistance. Every program has backup plans for their backup plans." He managed a small smile. "Sarah taught me that true security isn't about money. It's about having people who care looking out for you." Emily thought of Michael, how he'd always said similar things. "My husband believed that too. He used to say wealth was meaningless unless it created something good in the world." "Michael sounds like someone I would have liked to know," Daniel said gently. "He would have loved what you're doing here." Emily blinked back sudden tears. "Sometimes I worry I'm not teaching Sammy enough about giving back, about seeing the good in people even when times are hard." "From what I've seen, you're teaching him through example," Daniel replied. "That's the most powerful lesson of all." They talked through lunch about their shared dreams for the community, about healing through helping others, about building something meaningful from loss. Emily found herself sharing stories about Michael she hadn't told anyone else, while Daniel spoke more about Sarah and how her passion for justice still guided his work. The afternoon sun was setting when Emily finally gathered her things to leave. The golden light painted the city streets in warm hues, transforming the urban landscape into something almost magical. As she walked home, her steps felt lighter than they had in months. The foundation office had shown her that good people were still fighting for what mattered, that loss could become a catalyst for positive change. For the first time since Michael's death, she felt something flutter in her chest, a familiar feeling she'd almost forgotten. Hope. It wasn't just about Daniel's kindness or the foundation's work. It was the reminder that even in darkness, light could grow, that broken hearts could heal by helping others heal, that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over. It was just taking an unexpected turn towards something new. Emily sat at her desk in the Foundation's volunteer office, surrounded by colourful event planning sheets and budget proposals. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, warming her shoulders as she worked on the upcoming children's fundraiser. "What about face painting?" she suggested, looking up at Daniel, who stood reviewing the plans. "Kids always love that." He smiled, reaching for his coffee mug. "Perfect. And it's budget-friendly, too." Over the past week, Emily had discovered a different side to the billionaire philanthropist. He brought donuts for the staff on Monday mornings, knew everyone's names, and even helped the janitor move furniture when needed. His public image as a cold corporate figure couldn't have been further from reality. "We could set up activity stations," Emily continued, making notes. "Art projects, story corner, simple games. You're really good at this," Daniel observed. "Making every dollar count while keeping it fun for the kids?" Emily felt her cheeks warm at the praise. Years of practice throwing birthday parties on a tight budget. Daniel pulled up a chair beside her desk. "Speaking of budgets, the board approved additional funding for the reading program. We can expand to 3 more shelters next month." His eyes lit up when he talked about helping others. Emily had noticed this happening more and more, moments when his careful composure gave way to genuine excitement about making a difference. "That's wonderful news!" she beamed. "Those kids need—" Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from Vanessa. Emily's smile faded as she declined it. The 3rd call today. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. "Just my sister-in-law being persistent." Emily sighed. "She's not happy I'm volunteering here." The Carters seem to have strong opinions about a lot of things lately, Daniel said carefully. Emily nodded, thinking about how Vanessa had cornered her at the grocery store yesterday, voice dripping with fake concern. "Really, Emily, it doesn't look good. A widow getting so friendly with a man facing scandal?" The memory of Vanessa's words still stung, but Emily pushed it aside. She had work to do. Across town in the Carter firm's executive suite, Vanessa paced in front of Richard's desk, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "She's there every day now," Vanessa snapped. "Planning events, having lunch with him. People are talking." Richard loosened his tie, looking irritated. "What do you expect me to do about it?" "Something, anything. She's getting too close. What if she starts asking questions about Michael's old files?" "She won't," Richard said, but uncertainty flickered across his face. "We need to discredit her," Vanessa insisted. "Make her look unstable, attention-seeking. The grieving widow trying to climb social ranks through scandal. I'll have someone look into her background." Richard finally agreed. "Everyone has secrets." Later that evening, Emily sat at her kitchen table after putting Sammy to bed. She opened her laptop to check emails and froze. An anonymous message waited in her inbox with the subject line, "What really happened at Carter Industries?" Her hands trembling slightly, she clicked it open. Attached were scanned documents, internal memos, bank statements, transfer records. At first glance, they seemed to show large sums of money being moved between accounts before Michael's death. Emily's heart pounded as she read through the files. Names jumped out at her. Richard's signature authorizing unusual payments, Vanessa's private account receiving unexplained transfers. And dates that lined up with when Michael had first started acting, worried about work, just weeks before the accident. "Oh, God," she whispered, pieces clicking into place. She remembered Michael's late nights reviewing books, his growing concern about discrepancies, how he'd tried to schedule meetings with the board, how Richard had insisted on driving him to that last meeting, the one Michael never made it to. The car accident that killed him had been ruled a tragedy. Wet roads, mechanical failure. But now, Emily's gaze fell on a final document, a formal complaint filed by Daniel's company alleging financial misconduct at Carter Industries. The date was just 2 days before the scandal about Daniel broke in the news. The timing wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't about Daniel at all. He was being framed. The real scandal lay with the Carters themselves. Emily sat back, her mind reeling. The pieces were forming a picture she didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore. Her in-laws weren't just trying to discredit Daniel, they were covering their own tracks. And Michael? Had he discovered what they were doing? Her laptop screen glowed in the darkness as the truth settled over her like a heavy blanket. The people who had made her feel small at the gala, who had treated her like an outsider for years, who now warned her away from Daniel, they were the ones with something to hide. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel as she pulled into the parking lot of Carter Industries' old building. Her heart thudded against her ribs as she spotted Jim Preston's car, Michael's former assistant controller who'd retired just months after the accident. The aging brick building looked smaller than she remembered from company picnics. She found Jim, waiting in the coffee shop across the street, his silver hair neat but his face lined with worry. "Mrs. Carter." He stood, pulling out a chair. "I was surprised to get your call. Please, it's Emily." She sat down, noticing how his hands trembled slightly as he stirred his coffee. "Thank you for meeting me." Jim glanced around the nearly empty shop. "You said this was about Michael's old files." Emily pulled out copies of the anonymous documents, spreading them carefully on the table. Jim's face paled as he looked them over. "Where did you get these?" he whispered. "That's not important right now." Emily leaned forward. "Were you aware of these transactions?" Jim removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes. "I suspected. Michael came to me about irregularities in the books, large sums moving through shell companies, fake vendor accounts. Richard's fingerprints were all over it. And the accident." Emily's voice caught. "I can't prove anything," Jim said quietly. "But Michael was going to the board that day. He had evidence of Richard's embezzlement scheme. Then suddenly—" He trailed off, pain crossing his face. Emily's coffee sat untouched, growing cold. "And now they're framing Daniel West to cover their tracks." Jim nodded grimly. "Richard doctored records to make it look like Daniel's company was involved in the missing funds. But these documents?" He tapped the papers. "These show the real money trail, back to Richard and Vanessa." Emily's phone buzzed. A text from Richard asking about Sammy's trust fund meeting. Her skin crawled. "I should have spoken up sooner," Jim said, his voice heavy with regret. "But after Michael, I was scared. They made sure I took early retirement with a very generous package. Bought my silence." "I understand," Emily said softly. And she did. Fear was a powerful thing. She felt it right now, churning in her stomach. But stronger than her fear was a quiet voice inside her, one that sounded like Michael. "Do what's right, even when it's hard." She gathered the documents with trembling fingers. "Thank you, Jim, for telling me the truth." Back in her car, Emily sat for several long moments. The weight of what she'd learned pressed down on her chest. Richard and Vanessa hadn't just stolen money. They'd destroyed an innocent man's reputation to hide their crimes. And Michael? She pushed that darker thought away. She couldn't go there yet. Her phone felt heavy in her hand as she pulled up Daniel's number. 3 rings, then his calm voice. "Emily? I need to see you. Privately, it's important." A pause. "My office, 8 o'clock? I'll be there." The city lights blurred past her taxi window that evening as she headed downtown. Daniel's building stood quiet, most offices dark, except for the soft glow from his top-floor window. The security guard nodded, clearly expecting her. The elevator ride felt endless. Daniel met her at his office door, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. His usual composed expression shifted to concern when he saw her face. "Emily, what's wrong?" She walked to his desk, hands shaking slightly as she removed the documents from her bag. "I know who's behind the scandal, and why." Daniel's eyes widened as she spread out the evidence. He sat down heavily in his chair as she explained everything: the embezzlement, Richard's cover-up, Jim's confirmation. "This proves it wasn't us," he said quietly, studying the papers. "The timing of transactions, the shell companies, it all points to Richard." "Yes." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Daniel looked up at her, his expression grave. "You understand what this means? Going public with this won't just clear my name, it will destroy the Carters, your in-laws, Sammy's family." "I know." Emily's throat felt tight. "The press will be brutal. They'll drag everyone through the mud, including you and Sammy." He leaned forward. "This could cost you everything." Emily touched her wedding ring, thinking of Michael's integrity, his courage, the truth he'd died trying to expose. "Then it's worth it," she said softly. Daniel stood, walking around his desk. He held out his hand. "Are you sure?" Emily took his hand, feeling the strength in his grip. Their eyes met in the quiet office, his grateful, hers determined. "Yes," she said simply. Their handshake sealed more than a partnership. It was a promise to see justice done, no matter the cost, to honor truth over fear, to choose right over easy. The downtown office hummed with quiet intensity as Emily and Daniel worked late into the evening. Stacks of papers covered the conference room table, each one a piece of the puzzle they were carefully assembling. The city lights twinkled outside the window, a reminder of how many nights they'd spent here this week. Emily rubbed her tired eyes, squinting at another bank statement. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. "Look at this," she said, sliding a document across to Daniel. 3 separate transfers on the same day, all just under the reporting threshold. Daniel leaned in, his shoulder brushing hers as he studied the numbers. Classic structuring technique. They were trying to avoid detection. His voice was soft but certain. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion, though his resolve never wavered. The legal team had set up a command center in the adjacent office. Through the glass walls, Emily could see them working, young associates in rolled-up sleeves, typing furiously on laptops, while senior partners huddled around whiteboards covered in timelines and connections. Emily stood, stretching her back. "I should check on the records from City Hall again." She'd spent countless hours there this week, digging through public files, cross-referencing dates and permits. "Let me drive you," Daniel offered, reaching for his keys. "No need. You have enough on your plate with the press conference prep." She gathered her bag, but Daniel was already holding her coat. "I insist. We both need some fresh air." The evening air was crisp as they walked to his car. Emily noticed how he automatically matched his pace to hers, something Michael used to do. The thought brought a familiar ache, but it wasn't as sharp as before. At City Hall, the security guard recognized them now, offering a friendly nod as they signed in. The records room was deserted this late, just rows of filing cabinets and fluorescent lights. "Here," Emily said, pulling out a drawer. "Property records from when Richard first set up those shell companies." Her fingers flew through the files with practiced efficiency. Daniel watched her work, a small smile playing at his lips. "You're good at this. Should have been a detective." "Just thorough," she replied, but couldn't help feeling pleased. Michael always said attention to detail matters most when the stakes are high. They fell into comfortable silence, the rustle of papers the only sound. Emily felt Daniel's presence behind her, steady and reassuring. It struck her how natural this felt. working together, trusting each other, fighting for what was right. Back at the office, the legal team had ordered dinner. Chinese takeout boxes littered the conference room as they reviewed their findings. Emily noticed how Daniel made sure everyone ate, personally thanking each person for their dedication. The press conference structure is set, one of the lawyers reported. We open with the evidence timeline, then move to the documented proof of falsification. Daniel nodded, and the reporters. All major networks confirmed. 9 a.m. sharp. Emily's stomach tightened. Tomorrow everything would change. The truth would be public, and there would be no going back. As if reading her thoughts, Daniel touched her arm gently. Take a walk with me. They ended up in his private office. The city spread out below them like a carpet of stars. Emily loved this view. It reminded her how small problems could seem from the right perspective. I never thanked you properly, Daniel said, hands in his pockets as he looked out the window. For what? For believing in the truth, for being willing to risk everything to expose it. He turned to face her. You remind me what real strength looks like. Emily felt her cheeks warm. The sincerity in his eyes made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. She looked down, unable to form a response. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken things. Then Daniel cleared his throat softly. We should finish the final review. Back in the conference room, they methodically went through every page of the report one last time. Emily's handwriting filled the margins with notes and cross-references. Daniel's neat annotations provided context and clarification. The clock crept past midnight as they assembled everything into organized binders. Each page was carefully numbered, each exhibit tagged and labeled. Emily's eyes burned with fatigue, but satisfaction filled her chest. They had done it. The truth would finally come to light. The legal team began packing up, their voices hushed with anticipation of tomorrow's revelations. Emily watched them file out, leaving just her and Daniel in the quiet office. Together, they stood looking at the completed report, the product of their long days and longer nights, of shared determination and growing trust. Tomorrow it would change lives, expose lies, and hopefully bring justice. But for now, in this moment, it represented something else, the power of two people choosing to stand for truth, no matter the cost. The morning sun cast long shadows across the plaza outside Daniel's corporate headquarters. Emily watched through the window as reporters and camera crews swarmed like ants, setting up equipment and checking microphones. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her navy blazer. Here. Daniel appeared beside her, offering a cup of coffee. You look like you could use this. Thanks. She wrapped her fingers around the warm cup, drawing comfort from its familiar scent. There are so many of them. The truth has a way of drawing attention, Daniel said quietly. His calm presence steadied her nerves. The conference room behind them buzzed with activity. Lawyers reviewed talking points while PR staff distributed press packets. Emily noticed how Daniel's team moved with practiced efficiency, but there was an electric tension in the air. This wasn't just another press conference. 5 minutes, called the PR director, checking her watch. Emily's phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Jenkins, her elderly neighbor who was watching Sammy. He's fine. Made pancakes. Good luck today. The simple message brought tears to her eyes. So many people had supported them through this, from Daniel's legal team to her neighbors to the tired city clerk who'd stayed late helping her search records. Ready? Daniel asked softly. Emily squared her shoulders. Ready. They descended to the lobby together, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. Security personnel flanked them as they approached the building's main entrance. Through the glass doors, Emily could see the crowd had grown even larger. Remember, Daniel said. "Just like we practiced. Let me handle the technical questions. You speak from the heart about what you discovered." The doors swung open. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, their voices blending into a wall of sound. Emily focused on putting one foot in front of the other as they made their way to the podium. Daniel stepped up first, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Good morning. Thank you all for coming. Today we're here to present evidence of serious financial misconduct." Emily watched as he outlined the basics. How the Carter firm had systematically falsified reports, created fake transactions, and manipulated data to frame his company. His voice remained steady, professional, but she could hear the underlying steel. Then it was her turn. Her heart pounded as she approached the microphone. "My name is Emily Carter. A year ago I lost my husband Michael. Today I stand here because he taught me that truth matters more than comfort." Her voice grew stronger as she detailed her discovery of the suspicious documents, the patterns she'd noticed, the evidence trail she'd followed. The crowd hung on every word. "The same family that claimed to honor my husband's memory chose to perpetuate fraud instead," she concluded. "Michael believed in justice. This is how I honor him." Questions erupted like firecrackers. Reporters waved hands, shouted names, thrust microphones forward. Daniel fielded the technical queries with precise clarity, while Emily handled the personal ones with quiet dignity. "Ms. Carter, weren't you afraid of consequences?" "The only consequence I feared was failing to do what's right." "Mr. West, how did you verify these allegations?" "Every document has been independently authenticated. The full report is in your press packets." Then came the question Emily had been dreading. "Ms. Carter, how do you respond to accusations that you betrayed your in-laws?" Before she could speak, Daniel stepped forward. His voice filled the plaza. "Let me be clear about something. Emily Carter stood for truth when no one else would. She risked personal relationships, faced intimidation, and worked tirelessly to expose corruption. That's not betrayal. That's integrity." Spontaneous applause broke out. Emily felt tears prick her eyes as Daniel continued. "She exemplifies the values that should guide all our business practices: honesty, courage, and unwavering commitment to what's right." The press conference stretched for another hour. By the end, Emily's feet ached in her sensible shoes, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months. Back inside, Daniel's team was already monitoring news coverage. Headlines flashed across screens. "Westcorp cleared. Carter firm implicated in massive fraud. Widow exposes financial scandal. Truth prevails. West and Carter partnership reveals corruption." "You did wonderfully," Daniel's PR director beamed. "The public response is overwhelming positive." Emily checked her phone. Messages poured in, from other parents at Sammy's school, from the children's home volunteers, from old friends. Even her college roommate had seen the news in Seattle. "Go home," Daniel said gently. "Be with Sammy. You've more than earned it." The drive home felt surreal. Streets she'd known for years seemed different somehow. Brighter, more vibrant. Or maybe she was the one who had changed. She found Sammy and Mrs. Jenkins making paper airplanes in the living room. Her son launched himself into her arms. "Mommy, I saw you on TV. You looked like a superhero." Emily hugged him tight, breathing in his familiar scent of crayons and apple juice. "I'm no superhero, sweetie, just someone trying to do the right thing." "That's what superheroes do," Sammy said with 6-year-old wisdom. As evening fell, they heard pops and crackles outside. The city's summer festival had begun, right on schedule. Emily and Sammy curled up on their small window seat, watching fireworks paint the sky in brilliant bursts of color. "Pretty," Sammy whispered, his head heavy against her shoulder. "Yes," Emily agreed, feeling a deep peace settle in her chest. For the first time since Michael's death, she felt truly at rest. The truth was out. Justice had prevailed. Whatever came next, she would face it knowing she had honored Michael's memory in the way that mattered most, by standing up for what was right. The fireworks continued to bloom against the dark sky, and Emily held her son close, grateful for this moment of simple joy. Emily's phone buzzed at 6 a.m. Bleary-eyed, she reached for it, expecting her usual weather alert. Instead, her screen filled with notification after notification. Her heart stopped when she saw the first headline. Gold digger or victim? The truth about Emily Carter. The article featured photos of her and Daniel at the gala, but something was wrong. The images had been altered, making innocent moments look intimate. Her hand on his arm while discussing fundraising plans appeared suggestive. His jacket around her shoulders after the wine incident seemed like a lover's gesture. "No," she whispered, scrolling frantically. "No, no, no!" More articles popped up. More photos. Comment sections filled with cruel speculation. Someone had even dug up pictures from Michael's funeral, questioning whether she'd been truly grieving or already planning her next move. Her hands shaking, Emily recognized Vanessa's careful touch in the narrative being woven. The stories painted her as a calculating widow who had used her husband's death to gain sympathy, then seduced a billionaire to secure her future. "Mommy." Sammy stood in her doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Why are you crying?" Emily quickly wiped her face. "Just tired, sweetheart. Let's get you ready for school." But by the time she dropped Sammy off, her phone had become unbearable. Social media trolls flooded her accounts with hateful messages. Some called her horrible names. Others suggested she should be ashamed to call herself Michael's widow. At work, she felt eyes following her. Whispers trailed in her wake. Her supervisor called her into the office just before lunch. "Emily," Mrs. Peterson began carefully, "about your volunteer position at the children's home." Emily's stomach clenched. "What about it?" "Given the current situation, we feel it's best to pause your involvement. Temporarily, of course, just until things settle down." "But those children need—" "We've already received calls from concerned parents. Our donations have dropped 30% since this morning. We have to think about the greater good." Emily left the office in a daze. Her phone buzzed again, another news alert. This time it was financial. News. Westcorp stock dips amid CEO's personal controversy. Her throat tightened. Daniel's company was suffering because of her. She thought about calling him, but what would she say? That she was sorry for ruining everything? That maybe they should have left the truth buried? No, she couldn't contact him. He'd already risked too much to help her expose the truth. She wouldn't drag him down further. Back home, more bad news waited. The children's home had removed her name from their volunteer roster. Her social media accounts were so overwhelmed with hate that she had to shut them down. Someone had even posted her address online, forcing her to delete her profiles completely. Emily sat at her kitchen table, staring at her laptop screen. A new email arrived from an anonymous sender. How much did he pay you to destroy his rivals, or was it just the thrill of sleeping your way to the top? Her phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. She let it go to voicemail. Another call, his PR team this time. "Ms. Carter, we need to discuss damage control strategies." She ignored that one too. Hours crawled by. Sammy played quietly with his toys, sensing her mood. The sun set. More emails arrived, more calls went unanswered. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications until she finally turned it off completely. In her bedroom that night, Emily lay rigid in the darkness. The ceiling offered no answers, no comfort. Tears slid silently down her temples into her hair. Maybe they were right. She whispered into the empty room. maybe I am nothing. 3 days crawled by in a fog of silence. Emily threw herself into cleaning the children's home, even though she wasn't officially welcome anymore. She came early before anyone else arrived, armed with cleaning supplies she'd bought with her own money. The empty halls echoed with her footsteps as she scrubbed windows, dusted shelves, and organized art supplies. The work kept her hands busy and her mind quiet. Sometimes she talked to Michael in whispers while she cleaned, imagining his kind eyes and gentle smile. Bills piled up on her kitchen table at home: utilities, rent, Sammy's after-school programs. Her part-time job barely covered the basics, and now the volunteer stipend was gone too. But she couldn't think about that. Not yet. On the 4th afternoon, she was repainting a wall that had been scuffed by little shoes and toy cars. The familiar motion of the brush helped calm her racing thoughts. Paint fumes filled the air as she worked, trying to make the children's space beautiful again, even if she couldn't be part of their lives anymore. "Emily?" The quiet voice startled her. She turned to find Daniel standing in the doorway, his suit jacket draped over one arm. He looked tired, with shadows under his eyes that matched her own. "What are you doing here?" she asked, quickly wiping her hands on her old jeans. Instead of answering, he crossed the room and gently took the paintbrush from her grip. His fingers were warm against hers for just a moment. "You can't fight lies with silence," he said softly. Something inside Emily cracked. The tears she'd been holding back for days spilled over. "I'm ruining everything," she choked out. "Your company, the children's home, Michael's memory. I should have just stayed quiet, should have known my place." Daniel set the brush down carefully. "Is that what you believe? Or what they want you to believe?" She couldn't answer through her tears. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. "I've been trying to reach you," he said. "My team says you won't take their calls. I didn't want to make things worse." Emily dabbed at her eyes. "Your stock prices will recover," he finished firmly. "Truth always finds its feet eventually, but we have to stand up and fight for it." She looked around the empty playroom at the half-finished wall. "I don't know how anymore. Everything I touch seems to fall apart." Daniel's expression softened. "Then we'll rebuild it together. All of it." "Why would you risk that? After everything that's happened?" "Because you risked everything to help me," he said simply. "And because it's the right thing to do." They sat down on tiny plastic chairs meant for children, their knees almost touching. Daniel pulled out his tablet and opened a document. "I have an idea," he said. "What if we relaunch the charity under a new name? Start fresh with a mission that honors Michael's legacy while looking towards the future?" Emily's breath caught. "You'd do that?" He smiled. "I already have the paperwork started. We just need to choose a name." For the next few hours, they worked together in the quiet room. Emily shared stories about Michael's dedication to helping others, his dream of making education accessible to every child. Daniel took notes, asking thoughtful questions and offering suggestions. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, they had a plan. The Michael Carter Memorial Foundation would focus on educational opportunities for underprivileged children, with special programs for those who had lost parents. "We'll announce it next week," Daniel said. "Full media coverage, complete transparency about our mission and funding, no more hiding in shadows." Emily felt something unfamiliar in her chest, a warmth she hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. That night, after tucking Sammy into bed, she curled up on her own worn couch. For the first time since the scandal broke, her mind felt quiet. She pulled an old photo of Michael from her wallet and touched it gently. "I think you'd be proud of this," she whispered to his smiling face. We're going to help so many children." As she drifted off to sleep, still holding the photo, a small smile played across her lips. It wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic moment, just a quiet ending to weeks of turmoil. But in that peaceful silence, Emily finally found rest. Days crept by like shadows across empty rooms. Emily threw herself into cleaning the children's home, even though she was no longer an official volunteer. She came early, before anyone else arrived, armed with cleaning supplies she'd bought herself. The work helped quiet her mind. Scrubbing windows, mopping floors, organizing shelves. It gave her hands something to do, while her heart ached. The mounting bills at home could wait. Here, at least, she could still make a difference, even if no one knew she was doing it. One Wednesday afternoon, she balanced on a stepladder, painting over scuff marks on the playroom wall. The cheap paint dripped occasionally, but she caught each drop with her cloth before it could stain the floor. The radio played softly in the background, keeping her company. The sound of footsteps made her freeze. She'd gotten careless, staying too late. Usually she was gone before the afternoon staff arrived. "Emily?" Daniel's voice was gentle, concerned. She didn't turn around, kept her brush moving in careful strokes. "How did you find me?" she asked quietly. "The cleaning staff mentioned someone was coming in early to help. I had a feeling it might be you." She heard him move closer, but still didn't look. "I'm almost finished here. You shouldn't be seen with me right now. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I know, I'm sorry, The paintbrush trembled in her hand. "I couldn't bear to hear you say it was all a mistake. That helping me wasn't worth what it's cost you." Suddenly, Daniel was beside her. His hand covered hers, carefully taking the brush. "Come down from there, please." Her legs felt shaky as she descended the ladder. She still couldn't meet his eyes. "You can't fight lies with silence," he said softly. "Trust me, I've tried. It only lets them win." Something in his tone, the understanding, the warmth, broke through her careful walls. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I've ruined everything," she whispered. "The children's home is suffering. Your company's stock dropped. My son's teacher called yesterday to ask if he needed extra support because of all the publicity. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to do what was right." Daniel set the paintbrush down and turned her gently to face him. "Look at me, Emily." She forced herself to meet his gaze. His eyes were kind but determined. "You did do what was right. The truth matters. What the Carters did was wrong, and exposing it was necessary. Everything else, the lies, the photos, the cruel comments, that's not on you. That's on them. But the children's home will survive. In fact," he smiled slightly, "I have an idea about that." Emily wiped her eyes with her paint-stained hands. "What kind of idea? What if we rebuilt it? Not just the programs, but the whole organization. New name, new mission, new beginning." He paused. "We could name it after Michael." Her breath caught. "What?" "The Michael Carter Memorial Children's Center, a place that truly honors his memory. Not the twisted version his family created, but the real Michael, the man you loved, the father who wanted the best for his son. We'll make it everything he would have wanted it to be." Fresh tears fell, but these felt different, lighter somehow. "You'd do that. We would do that. Together." He reached for a clean cloth and gently wiped the paint smudges from her hands. "I meant what I said at the press conference, Emily. You stood for truth when no one else would. Now let me stand with you." She looked around the worn but loved playroom, imagining the possibilities. Fresh paint everywhere, not just patches. New books, better programs, a place that could help even more children. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes." They spent the next few hours sitting on the floor of the playroom, making plans. Daniel had already started the paperwork for the new organization. Emily's knowledge of the children's needs and the current programs would help shape its future. As the sun set outside, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Real, solid hope. That night, after tucking Sammy in, she curled up in her own bed. For the first time since the scandal broke, her mind wasn't racing with worries. Instead, it was full of possibilities, new programs they could start, ways to help more families, a legacy that would truly honor Michael. She fell asleep with a quiet smile on her face, dreaming of freshly painted walls and children's laughter. The renovation crews arrived early on a Monday morning. Emily watched from across the street as trucks pulled up to the children's home, carrying supplies and equipment. The old sign came down first, a bittersweet moment that made her heart squeeze. Daniel stood beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. "Ready?" he asked softly. She nodded, clutching her notebook filled with plans and ideas. Together, they crossed the street to meet the construction foreman. Over the next few weeks, the transformation was remarkable. Fresh paint brightened every room. New windows let in streams of natural light. The playground equipment, once rusty and worn, was replaced with colorful new structures that made passing children stop and stare with wonder. Emily threw herself into the work, coordinating with contractors and organizing volunteers who began trickling back. Many brought friends, drawn by the energy of renewal that filled the place. She often found herself working alongside people who had previously avoided her, their awkward smiles slowly warming into genuine ones. "Mrs. Peterson is back," one of the regular volunteers whispered excitedly one afternoon. The elderly donor had been one of the first to pull support when the scandal broke. Now she stood in the doorway, watching children play on the new equipment. Daniel had been quietly reaching out to former donors, sharing the truth and their vision for the future. One by one, they returned, often with increased support and heartfelt apologies to Emily. "I should have known better," Mrs. Peterson said, hugging Emily tightly. "You've always put these children first? Always?" The media landscape was shifting, too. Investigative reporters, intrigued by the initial scandal, had kept digging. They uncovered a trail of forged documents leading straight to Richard and Vanessa Carter. The evidence was damning. Years of financial manipulation, covered up by careful misdirection and social influence. Emily watched the news coverage from home, Sammy curled up beside her. The headlines were brutal. Carter family fortune built on lies, and socialite siblings face criminal charges. "Are you sad, Mummy?" Sammy asked, noticing her expression. She hugged him close. "No, sweetheart. Just thinking about how important it is to always tell the truth." The Carter family's carefully crafted reputation crumbled rapidly. Their social circle scattered, former friends suddenly remembering incidents that should have raised red flags. Richard's firm lost major clients. Vanessa's charity board positions evaporated overnight. One morning, a thick cream envelope arrived in Emily's mailbox. She recognized Vanessa's elegant handwriting immediately. Inside was a 4-page letter, the paper expensive, and the words clearly carefully chosen. "I don't expect forgiveness," Vanessa wrote. "What we did, what I did, was unforgivable. Not just the recent attacks, but the years of cruel comments and social manipulation. Michael would be ashamed of how we treated you. You deserved better. The children's home deserved better. I'm sorry." Emily read the letter twice, then carefully filed it away without responding. Some things, she decided, didn't need words. Forgiveness could be quiet, personal. She didn't need to give Vanessa the absolution she sought. The new children's center took shape beautifully. Daniel had insisted on top-quality everything, from educational materials to kitchen equipment. But it was Emily's touches that made it feel like home. Cozy reading nooks, art supplies in easy reach, and photos of smiling children on every wall. The Michael Carter Memorial Children's Center. Read the new sign, its letters gleaming in the morning sun. Below, smaller text proclaimed, "Where every child matters." One evening, as Emily was finishing up some paperwork, Daniel appeared in her office doorway. She'd gotten used to his quiet presence, the way he seemed to know when she needed support without having to ask. "The opening ceremony is scheduled for next Saturday," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "We've got press confirmed, donors excited, and enough activities planned to keep the kids entertained all day." Emily smiled, looking around at her new office, so different from the cramped corner where she'd started. "I can hardly believe how far we've come." "There's just one thing missing," Daniel said, sliding an envelope across her desk. "We need our executive director to give the opening speech." She picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was an official invitation to the ceremony, her name and new title printed in elegant script. "Daniel, before you say anything." He held up a hand. "Remember that you're the heart of this place. You always have been. The title just makes it official." Tears pricked at her eyes as she traced the letters of her name. "Thank you. For believing in me. For everything." He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that had become so familiar. "Will you do us the honor of opening the ceremony?" Emily thought of Michael, of how proud he would be to see his name associated with such good work. She thought of Sammy, who would grow up seeing what it meant to stand up for what was right. She thought of all the children who would find hope and help within these walls. "Yes," she said simply, "I'd be proud to." They sat there in comfortable silence as the evening light painted the walls gold. Outside, the new playground equipment cast long shadows across fresh grass. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more opportunities to make a difference. But for now, Emily simply let herself feel grateful for second chances and the courage to take them. The morning of the grand reopening dawned crisp and clear, perfect for new beginnings. Emily stood in front of the renovated building, taking in every detail. Colourful ribbons danced in the gentle breeze, wrapping around posts and trailing from trees. The freshly painted walls gleamed white in the morning sun, and flower beds bursting with spring blooms lined the walkways. Volunteers scurried about, arranging chairs on the lawn and setting up refreshment tables under white canopies. The excitement was palpable as they prepared for the hundreds of expected guests. "Mommy, look!" Sammy tugged at her sleeve, pointing to the new sign mounted above the entrance. The elegant lettering proclaimed, "The Carter Home, founded in love, rebuilt in hope." Below it, smaller text read, "Where every child finds their tomorrow." Emily's heart swelled. This was more than she'd ever dreamed possible during those dark days when the old children's home had seemed beyond saving. Now it stood transformed, a beacon of possibility. News vans began arriving, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers. Reporters adjusted their microphones and checked their cameras, while photographers scouted the best angles for their shots. "Mrs. Carter?" A young volunteer approached with a clipboard. "The first guests are arriving. Should we start seating them?" Emily nodded, smoothing her new navy blue dress, a gift from the staff, who'd insisted she needed something special for today. "Yes, please, and make sure the children know where to gather for the balloon release." More cars pulled up, disgorging elegantly dressed donors and community leaders. Many were faces she recognized from her days of seeking support for the old home. They smiled warmly now, greeting her like an old friend rather than a supplicant. the garden filled with chatter and laughter. Children from the home, dressed in their best clothes, helped usher guests to their seats. Their excited energy was infectious, spreading through the crowd like sparklers on a summer evening. Emily's phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "Everything ready backstage. You look beautiful, by the way." She glanced toward the podium and caught his eye. He stood tall in his charcoal suit, somehow managing to look both powerful and approachable. He gave her a small wave, and she felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. The ceremony began right on schedule. The local high school band played a stirring rendition of "What a Wonderful World." As the last guests found their seats, the mayor spoke first, praising the project as a model of community cooperation. Other dignitaries followed, each adding their voice to the chorus of celebration. Then it was Daniel's turn. He approached the microphone with that quiet confidence she'd come to know so well. The crowd hushed, hanging on his every word. "Good morning," he began, his voice warm and clear. "Today, we're not just opening a building. We're celebrating the power of unwavering faith in what's right." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the audience. "When I first met Emily Carter, she reminded me why I started my foundation. She showed me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to stand up for others." Emily felt tears threatening as Daniel continued. "That's why I'm honored to announce a new endowment of $1 million in Michael Carter's memory. This fund will ensure that no child ever has to be turned away from these doors." Gasps and applause rippled through the crowd. Daniel raised his hand for quiet, then turned to face Emily directly. "This home exists because one woman refused to surrender her grace," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "When others chose cruelty, she chose kindness. When faced with lies, she stood for truth. Emily Carter didn't just save this home, she showed us all what real strength looks like." The audience rose as one, their applause thunderous. Emily couldn't hold back her tears now. They rolled freely down her cheeks as she watched the faces before her. Faces of people who had once whispered behind their hands at the gala, now standing to honor her. "Ready?" Daniel called to the children gathered at the sides of the crowd. They nodded eagerly, each holding a bright balloon. 3, 2, 1. Release! 100 balloons soared into the cloudless sky, carrying messages of hope written by the children. Red, yellow, blue, and green spheres danced upward, catching the sunlight like jewels. The crowd gasped in delight, heads tilted back to watch the spectacular display. Emily felt a warm hand slip into hers. Daniel stood beside her, his fingers intertwining with her own. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The cheering crowd, the floating balloons, the beautiful new building behind them said everything. In that moment, as the balloons became tiny dots against the vast blue sky, Emily felt Michael's presence more strongly than she had since his death. She could almost hear his voice. "You did good, Em. You did real good." The applause continued, washing over them in waves. Children laughed and pointed at the disappearing balloons. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled in their notebooks. But Emily barely noticed any of it. All she felt was Daniel's hand in hers, warm and steady, as they stood together watching their shared dream take flight. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the newly landscaped grounds, the last of the celebration's guests trickled away. The catering staff quietly packed up tables and chairs, while maintenance workers collected stray balloons and ribbons that had fallen during the festivities. Emily paused to help a young volunteer stack the final row of chairs. "Thank you for staying to help," she said, touched by how many people had pitched in without being asked. "Are you kidding? After everything you did for this place? It's the least we can do." the girl replied with a bright smile before heading home. The garden took on an ethereal quality in the golden hour light. Purple and white petunias swayed gently in the evening breeze, their faces still turned toward the fading sun. The new fountain, a centerpiece of the redesigned space, created a peaceful background melody with its flowing water. Emily walked slowly along the winding path, her heels clicking softly against the fresh pavement. Her fingers trailed along the leaves of carefully tended shrubs as she passed. Each plant, each stone, each carefully considered detail represented a small piece of the dream that had somehow become reality. Through the gathering dusk, she spotted a familiar figure sitting alone on one of the garden's new wooden benches. Daniel had loosened his tie and rolled up his shirt sleeves, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him all day. He seemed lost in thought, watching the play of light on the fountain's spray. "Mind if I join you?" she asked softly. He looked up with a warm smile. "I was hoping you would." Emily settled beside him, grateful to finally rest her feet after the long day. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, listening to the water's gentle music and the distant sounds of children laughing from inside the building. "It's funny," Daniel said finally, his voice thoughtful. "When my sister died, I thought I'd never feel whole again. I threw myself into work, into charity, anything to fill the void." He turned to look at her. "I never expected that helping others would lead me exactly where I needed to be." Emily nodded, understanding completely. "After Michael died, I felt so lost, but somehow, trying to keep his memory alive through helping others, it gave me purpose again." She smiled softly. "Maybe that's how healing works, by giving away the very thing we think we've lost." "You know," Daniel said, "when I first started my foundation, I thought writing big checks was enough, that throwing money at problems would fix them." He shook his head ruefully. "You taught me what true wealth really is." Emily felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "It's the lives we touch," she replied, watching a group of children playing tag near the building's entrance. Their laughter carried across the garden like music. "That's the only fortune that really matters." The setting sun painted the clouds in brilliant shades of pink and gold, casting a magical glow over the garden. In the soft light, Emily could see traces of the man Daniel must have been before loss shaped him. Younger, perhaps more carefree, but without the depth of compassion that now marked his features. "I've been thinking," Daniel said, turning slightly to face her. His expression was earnest, almost shy. "We're launching a new community project next month, a network of after-school programs for underprivileged kids." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I could really use someone with your insight and heart to help coordinate it, someone who understands what these families need beyond just financial support." Emily felt her heart skip a beat. The offer represented more than just a job. It was an invitation to continue the journey they'd started together, to keep building on the foundation of trust and shared purpose they'd created. "Would you be interested in joining the team?" he asked quietly. From inside the building came the sound of children singing, the homework club's evening ritual. The familiar melody floated out through open windows, carrying with it all the hope and possibility that had brought them to this moment. Emily looked at Daniel, really looked at him. She saw the man who had stood beside her when others turned away, who had believed in her vision when it seemed impossible, who had helped her transform loss into legacy. In his eyes, she saw not just the past they'd shared, but a future full of possibility. She nodded, feeling a smile spread across her face. "Yes," she said simply. "I would love to." Relief and joy flickered across Daniel's features. He reached over and squeezed her hand briefly, a gesture that spoke volumes about their evolving relationship, built on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of understanding that only comes from walking through fire together. The last rays of sunlight caught the spray from the fountain, creating a momentary rainbow. Emily watched it dance in the golden light, marveling at how life could bring such unexpected beauty from the ashes of loss. She thought of Michael, of how proud he would be to see his legacy living on in the laughter of children and the kindness of strangers turned friends. As twilight settled over the garden, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. She wasn't the same woman who had nervously attended that charity gala all those months ago. She was stronger now, more sure of herself and her place in the world. And while the path ahead might not always be easy, she knew she wouldn't have to walk it alone. The sound of children's laughter continued to drift through the evening air, a reminder of why they were all here, of the lives they touched and the differences they could make. It was the sweetest music Emily could imagine, the sound of hope, of healing, of kindness rippling outward to change the world, one small act at a time.